Welcome back to Spotlight. I'd like to introduce my guest, Dr. Dawson. Thanks for coming to Spotlight.
Good to be here again, Cromwell.
Yes, and brother attorney, attorney Ferrara. Good to see you.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yes, and of course, we are going to be the election team for JTV next Monday evening, and we're going to be bringing live coverage from all the polling stations, coverage from the cultural center, and making analysis and commentary. So it should be quite an interesting evening.
I think it certainly will be, Cromwell. I mean, if the campaign itself has been serves as any sort of forecast, I expect that election night will be very, very interesting. I would say that certainly there seems to be little clarity or very clear ideas in the minds of people as to clear winners in a number of the districts. So I think that everyone would really be observing to see what the actual results will be.
Yeah. And certainly JTV's coverage and on Spotlight was going to be the place to be.
Yes, indeed, Cromwell. I mean, it is really a pleasure to be back here again to provide this coverage for the upcoming general elections. This one is a very interesting election, very hotly contested election indeed, and I think the general public, having exercised their right to vote, and we do encourage people to exercise that right to vote, and even those who are not registered voters are going to be keenly interested in the results of this election, and it is important really to bring up-to-date, thorough and comprehensive coverage for the public of this very important aspect of democracy, really, and the exercise of your democratic right.
Yeah, you get the sense that you want to refer to this particular election this year as a historic event. I mean, I don't know what's historic about it, but but you just, it's like it begs to be labeled a historic event. It's just another 4-year election.
I think, as you said, that begs to be labeled that, but I would say I also recall several elections in the past that seem to have gotten that moniker at the time of the elections. That always, it seems, the one at the turn of the century. Well, if we don't do this thing right, so it seems like somehow elections, the current election, the next election is always the most important and impactful elections.
But certainly general elections are very important because they can in fact shape the future of the territory, and that is of great importance. As to whether this one will be a historical or is a historical election, that might be open to debate. It may be historical in one respect, I don't know. We'll have to look at the statistics in terms of the number of candidates that are contesting the election for the 13 seats in the second House of Assembly. So that might be one historical aspect to this election. But certainly on the campaign trail, there are those who have labeled these elections as historic elections. The BVI is at a crossroad.
Yes, that's the next phrase.
That's the next pet phrase that is thrown out there. And it is important as to which direction we go. And it is important for voters to examine the whole question as to really whether, what are the major differences that there are between the political parties themselves and what they are putting forward as their platform and their vision and their plans for the territory over at least the next 4 years. And indeed, the independent candidates that have come into the ring, particularly the new candidates, both within the party structure and independent candidates that have thrown their hat into the ring, It is, in fact, a constitutional right for those who are eligible to contest the general elections, and so we can't really criticize anyone who has exercised that right. And I think it's a testimony to the vibrancy of our democracy, and that is very, very important indeed. I noticed that there were some comments made recently, I think, by the Premier himself about the number of candidates that have now been have thrown their hat into the ring, so to speak, and who were nominated on nomination day. The campaign itself has, in some respects, not been long, but in other respects, there are those who may feel that, well, it has gone on for a bit long or a bit too long. But the elections are around the corner, and we will know the outcome. Hopefully, there will be a clear decision come election night, and I think that's very important. One of the things that we seek to avoid is to have uncertainty with regard to the outcome of general elections. It's better to have certainty so that brings a clear position as we move forward as a democracy.
Well, we have 43 candidates. As you talk about how many candidates we have, 43 candidates have been nominated, and you have 16 at-large candidates for 4 at-large seats. What does that say about what's happening in the country right now, that so many people feel the need to participate in the electoral process as candidates? Does that can you glean anything from that activity?
I would say, Cromwell, a couple of things that emerge. One, the emergence even of a third party, the People's Progressive Alliance, and their emergence, again, signal, I think there was a level of dissatisfaction with the choices, and I think that's something that many of us have heard for the last couple of years, actually. That there was a feeling that, okay, we have given the National Democratic Party a chance, we've given the Virgin Party a chance, we're not quite satisfied with either, isn't there another option out there for us? So I think there was a measure of excitement even when the thought of a new party was around. Even 2 or 3 years ago, there was this question of some third party, and that was really caused quite a stir for a number of persons. So there is that whole issue of people looking for another answer. And of course, both parties, Virgin Islands Party and the National Democratic Party, do have their strong bases. So they still have their strong footholds of support that will continue to be with them. I think what's interesting, though, is the emergence. I remember, Jerry, you and I sitting here a couple of years ago, a couple of elections ago, and sung that the debt toll for independent candidates. That the way that elections seem to be going in the Virgin Islands at that time, it seems like the independent candidates were going to be totally squeezed out. And there was no opportunity for an independent candidate to do an election. And it remains to be seen whether or not independent candidates will do here. But it's interesting the number of independent candidates that have offered themselves in this election, particularly through the districts. We have 4 of them at large. But even throughout the district, there are several independent candidates. I must add, though, as far as I did do the math on that 43 figures as to whether it was a record. It's not. It's not. We've had 45, we've had 46. We've had more territorial candidates. We've also had more district candidates. As a matter of fact, I remember that one year in Rotong where they had I suppose there had to be a record 8. There were 8 candidates in Rotong in 1 year. So certainly the 43 is a very high number, but we've exceeded that as a total, as well as we exceeded it in both sections of the electoral process.
Close but no cigar.
Close but
Yeah, well, I think if I may just comment briefly on this aspect of it. The last general elections, of course, represented a landslide victory for the Virgin Islands Party. And they garnered 11 out of the 13 seats. And there were those who, of course, were singing the sort of demise of the National Democratic Party, but the two elected representatives of the National Democratic Party, they continued on, and of course we've now seen a resurgence in the party. We've seen quite a number of new persons that have joined as candidates, and clearly there has been this revitalization of the National Democratic Party. And they themselves have argued during the course of the campaign that when you look at the number of popular votes which were garnered in the last general election, that there wasn't really a substantial difference in that count between the Virgin Islands Party and the National Democratic Party. But in the end, we know you count by districts and by seats, and hence it represented a landslide victory. Over the last 4 years, sometimes when you have such a large majority, you're placed in a position where, first of all, great things are expected from a party that has been so successful at the polls. And secondly, in terms of that type of a victory, you have quite a large team of persons who have their own individual plans and projects which they would like to see come on stream and be implemented. And it's difficult, I suppose, in a sense, to please everyone during a 4-year period. A 4-year period really goes very quickly. And of course, there is you have to run the country itself, and there are many aspects to running a country that do not involve individual projects or pet projects. And so, and there have been a number of issues which have arisen during the last 4 years, which in a sense have contributed to a revitalization of the National Democratic Party, and also, I suppose, others thinking that, well, perhaps the two parties do not represent the kind of choice that they would like to see, and they would therefore like to see another political party. We know we have the United Party, which seems, for all intents and purposes, to be, fairly low-keyed and not really very functional, it seems. And I don't know that if they have any candidates during that are now going to contest this particular election under the banner of the United Party.
Not as far as
it doesn't seem so. I mean, even the head of the party, Conrad Maduro, who has, of course, made various broadcasts on radio and speeches and so on during the course of the campaign, I don't think he's one of the persons who has put up himself for nomination. And then we have now the People's Patriotic Alliance that have come on the scene, and they have 4 persons contesting the general election. And it's going to be interesting. I mean, they are a group of young persons, and it's going to be interesting to see how well they do in this general election, and how the extent to which they will be successful, and how do you measure their success in the context of the results of these general elections. Obviously, they would like to see all of their candidates come home, so to speak, and win seats. But they're all contesting in the at-large category. At least one thing they have been able to do is to field 4 candidates for the 4 at-large seats. They have not been able to field any candidates in the districts. And then we had there was mention of the other political party headed by Mr. Alan Wheatley.
The party of the people.
Yes. I don't know that there are any other persons contesting the election other than Mr. Wheatley himself under the banner of that political party. So there seems to have been a mood in the country, at least up to a certain point, whereby people were feeling that there was need for some fresh blood, some new blood on the scene to contest the general election and to help to lead the country forward, and also to make a transition from the older and well-established politicians to a newer generation of politicians and representatives. And the extent to which that transition is going to take place is going to be remains to be seen based on this general election.
But there seems to be a general dissatisfaction overall with the performance of the parties, and I think the independents seem to feel that this is their time. That if there was ever an opportunity for independents to gain office outside of the party system, that now is that time, given what appeared to be the wholesale dissatisfaction with the party system. I've been hearing people say they definitely not voting party. They don't like the party system. They think the country is too small for the party system. They think the party system is divisive. And they would like to choose the best persons for the job and let them go in there and work together for the betterment of the territory. Like one person said to me today, like it was in the old days. You know, what's your sense of that kind of mood in the country?
I think that's a popular opinion right now, that you really have persons who are saying, unlike previous years, and I think if we look back to the past elections, we'd find that 2003 and 2007 is when you really started to see people voting in a block. If I vote for a particular candidate in the district, I'll also vote for that person's other candidates at large. Wasn't quite the case in 95, wasn't quite the case in 99, but 2003 and 2007 we started to see that emerging. But now here's a reversal, you know, that people are saying, well, we tried that for 2003, 2007, and we don't like the results, and so we are going to go with who we figure are the 4 best persons. Of course, that in itself has its challenges. If you have people with various agendas, and sometimes persons who come in on the same platform have difficulty working together and agreeing on a plan, much more so for persons who did not even come in on the same platform. But it's a common talk that's around, that there will be, we're not going all the way, as they say. We're going to choose the best persons as we see fit, and it will be an interesting. It'll be interesting because this, of course, opens the door for, is there a possibility for a coalition? Because I still think that the 2 most powerful groups obviously are the Virgin Islands Party and the National Democratic Party, and even though we have emergence of other parties and independent candidates, the question still remains whether any of them can be strong enough to win. And if none of them win, it certainly means then that either the National Democratic Party or the Virgin Islands Party would have at least 7 and control the government.
Yeah. Just quickly before we go to the break, it seems though, despite the sentiments, the general sentiments and mood of the populace before the campaign, it seems that the parties have been able to perhaps regather their base in such a way that it gives you the feeling still that if you're not part of one of those parties, that you won't have any success. I think they have been able to, through the campaign, get their base shored up and right back in it again.
Yes, but I think that was my perception. I thought in the early stages of the campaign, or leading up to the campaign, I think there was certainly a prevalence of the thinking, or there seemed to be, that, well, we're dissatisfied with the 2 political parties, we're dissatisfied with the party system, we are now going to vote more freely as to who we think could best serve the country. Now, that doesn't necessarily translate into voting for independent candidates. It may translate into voting for particular candidates on each party's slate. And I think that the degree of success of the independent candidates is directly related to who those independent candidates are and the extent to which they may be popular in a particular sense within the country and are able to, as it were, garner that kind of support from the electorate during the upcoming elections. And that is still left to be seen. I think really this may, while we can say on the one hand that there certainly was an opening for independent candidates, it's still left to be seen whether that opening is going to translate into actual results with 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever independent candidates being elected. In terms of the whole concept of a coalition government, that has its challenges. And we know, of course, that the mighty Rocky, his Calypso...
He added one up.
Yeah, he already said, coalition government for you and me. Yeah. And he's one of my favorite Calypsonians in the BVI, going back for many, many years. And I always enjoy Rocky's Calypsos and so on, and the style with which he sings. And so that's his prediction. Mm-hmm. That's his prediction. But that is left to be seen. I think, yes, the parties have been able, to a large degree, to sort of corral their support. But I still think that there's a body of the electorate who may be thinking that, well, we're not going to just strictly vote party lines. We're going to vote for individual candidates as we see fit. So it's left to be seen.
We're gonna take a break for a word from our sponsors. But one of the things that the independents have going for them is the way the party members behaved when it came to important issues regarding the people and their choice of loyalty to the party over the loyalty to the voters or to the people. And that's certainly a wedge, I think, that the independent candidates is trying to drive home into the parties. We're going to talk a little bit about that right after this break.
Spotlight is brought to you by CCT Global Communication, DataPro, Orion Law, Clarence Thomas Limited, Virgin Island Motors, and Bolo's Wholesale Cash and Carry.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm Edwin. I'm here with Dr. Dawson and Attorney Ferreira, and this is the warm-up to election coverage. We're going to have big election coverage coming up on November the 10th right here on JTV, special edition. 7th, yes, November the 7th. Sorry. Right here on JTV, special edition of Spotlight on the Monday evening. We're going to be bringing you live coverage. We're going to keep you up to date, whatever's going on, all accounts, telling you who's in front. We're going to be predicting winners. So that I've been wanting to do that, like the big boys in the States, 15% of the vote count we project.
we don't have any exit polls though.
We don't have any exit polls.
Exactly.
We don't have any exit polls. But at some point in an evening, at a certain count, at a certain point in the count, we should be able to tell before the count is complete who the winner is. But it's sheer mathematics.
Unless it's one of those
really tight ones. And of course, we could say it's too close a call.
Yeah, of course.
So,
And then even it depends on too, because we vote, the counts come to one counting station and they go by box by box according to the polling station, so that if a person is very strong in a particular area, I'll make an example, and I don't know that this is the case. Let me put that out front. Say, for instance, Alvin Christopher being from Brewers Bay, is strong in Brewers Bay. I don't know that to be the case.
Right.
But if you count the Kingambe box first and look at that as something to forecast the entire
measurement, you might make a mistake. Yeah, we were talking before we left the break about the independents' hope to drive a wedge between the people and the parties, and particularly in light of certain occurrences during the last 4 years, where certain members of the parties were in disagreement with certain policies and certain actions, but towed the party line. Their loyalty, and the public perceived that their loyalty was to the party as opposed to the people. And I think that had a substantial amount to do with the people begin to feel that in the instance where there's a decision to be made by the elected representative between loyalty to the party and loyalty to the people, inevitably the politician chooses the party all the time.
Yes, well, I mean, there probably are one or two issues on which that sort of perception has been put out there, and indeed has formed part of the campaign itself, and has been touted by the opposition party or opposition candidates, indeed. And it's going to be interesting to see whether that plays, how that plays really. I think in the final analysis, the electorate may very well look at this and say that, well, the Virgin Islands Party has had a certain history of being in power. And the NDP were given 4 years 2 elections ago, and there may be a perception amongst a certain section of the electorate that, well, we gave the NDP a particular chance. There was a measure of dissatisfaction with the NDP. We put back in the Virgin Islands Party during this last 4 years, and there was a measure of dissatisfaction centered around certain particular issues in relation to the VIP. And so it is to some extent understandable that people who think in that way will become somewhat disheartened by the party system and not really see this as just having two entrenched political parties. And there are many arguments as to whether it is in the interest of a country to have two entrenched political parties, or what some people refer to as a two-party system.
Yeah.
And the extent to which that brings divisiveness in the country. And of course, on the one hand, we argued, the argument was put previously that where we didn't have strong political parties, the parties only really functioned for electioneering. They didn't function continuously during the course of the 4-year period. And there was a need for more entrenched political parties and more of a structured party system to be put in place. Now, to some extent, we have achieved that. We have a more structured party system in place. And then you now have people saying, well, look, perhaps we should be going back to what we had previously, right? Because the more structured party system
the argument has yet to be made.
Exactly. So, but independent candidates, I mean, it's always a challenge, going to be a challenge for independent candidates in the face of two strong political parties. Because the party system, the way it is structured, the way it operates, the way it's financed, the way it's run from the point of view of campaigning, gives the persons on the party ticket a distinct advantage. When you're a loner, so to speak, and you have to mount your own campaign, and particularly if you're running at large, territorial candidate, right, then you have to, in essence, campaign for the entire territory. And we've seen this as being one of the challenges that has faced the independent candidates and also even the new political party on the scene, because they don't come from that kind of strength in financially and otherwise in terms of carrying on a campaign. And they have adopted different approaches, which are to some extent interesting and innovative. I mean, this sort of, I think one is referred to as somewhat of a chatter.
The village mingle.
Village mingle, right, village mingle. I thought it was a rather interesting concept, the village mingle concept and so on. And some of that actually, and other candidates, independent candidates have sought to do this, where they piggyback on established programs in the public domain. They would call into certain of the talk shows and so on and so forth in order to make a point, in order to pose certain questions.
They use the electronic media more to their advantage.
Exactly, and use it freely.
Yes.
Right, very much so. And I mean, I think we can all agree that really when we look at the online news outlets in particular, they really gave a lot of coverage to the elections. Entire speeches by parties on there every day, and then from the electronic side as well, a number of parties and candidates launching websites, the use of Facebook, and a lot of interaction taking place in Facebook. And again, it's a pity that we do not have a more demographic means to break down the demographics as to voting trends in the territory, to, for instance, get the sense, for instance, that the impact of the young persons, certainly when it comes to websites and Facebook and so on, you would expect that those are the persons who are more reached via those means, and to see whether, in fact, more of them got involved in the electoral process or were particularly keen towards politicians who utilize that process most effectively.
The media this time has done a really good job of bringing the information to the public. The radio stations, the morning shows, television programs, there's been of newspapers, there's been a slew of free information in news organizations for people to get a sense of what the politicians are saying. How well they've used it is, of course, another argument.
I think that's a good, in terms of the unfiltered parts too, in the sense that a lot of them, if the speeches were available, they put the entire speech out there.
Yes.
No commentary, no value judgment, just the entire unfiltered speech given by the particular politician. And it's out there, and it's left for the voters to take their time and read and see, is this what I'm looking for as far as my representative is concerned.
Yeah. It's interesting because talking specifically about the use of the media, in particular Facebook and things like that, it's interesting to see how well utilized that has been. I mean, I am a fairly new comer to Facebook.
Yeah, you don't have that very many posts, Jerry.
No, I don't post much, but I observe a lot. I'm like the guy who's quietly there, kind of thing,
The Facebook family will say you look at news.
Yeah, exactly. Occasionally, I venture out and say something, but I do observe that certain candidates in particular are heavily utilizing postings on Facebook and so on and so forth. And I think also there has been some initiative to ensure the registration of a number of young voters, over the last several months in particular. And I think one candidate in particular, Mr. Walwyn, he had a particular drive, which I think was out of UP's Cineplex over a weekend period to register young voters. Yes. And certainly he's one of the persons who is utilizing social media. And I think this has come to the fore, particularly because how President Obama has been able to utilize that social media effectively for campaigning during his last campaign. And it's going to be interesting to see what sort of impact that has, because some of the more older and more traditional politicians have not resorted much to the social media, if at all. But the extent to which they may be sort of not using that source and the impact it will have is left to be seen. But I think it comes back to the whole question of when you go district by district, what is the demographics of the registered voters in the various districts? How many young people are voters, and how many actually turn up to vote? Because it's all well and good to be a voter, registered voter, but you have to actually exercise. If you don't exercise your right, then you're not going to be counted.
I think historically, though, we've had good voter turnouts. Once you've registered, we usually have, I think, around 65% or more turnout.
Yeah.
Now we have some figures, and we're going to see them up on the screen. A summary of district voters in 2007 compared to the new registered voters in 2011, and we'll see that in 2007 in the first district we had a total number of registered voters in that district of 1,281. And now this year we have a total of 1384. It seems as though that there's been perhaps a 12 to 14% increase in registrants.
Yes, I think 103. See, it seems is a figure.
I'm looking at the total in the bottom of 11,197 in 2007 and 12,609 in 2011, which is about just over 1,400 more registered voters.
Yes.
Now, when listening to the supervisor of election, she was saying that a significant portion of the new registered voters were young people. And it bodes well, of course, for the territory that young people are getting more politically involved or politically active, or at least voting. How you think that would play out in the upcoming elections? Which way the voters, the young voters, are going to go? Are they going to go with what appear to be for lack of a better word, a sexier party? In terms of the party with the younger candidates as opposed to the party with the older candidates, or the newer party as opposed to the older party. How you see this?
I think there may be a tendency for young people to vote more for young candidates. But we have to also remember that both established political parties, the VIP and the NDP, they each have a youth arm. Right, and the purpose of that obviously is to, on the one hand, have young people participating in the party process and hence in the election process from a campaigning point of view, and also getting the vote out for their candidates. And also each political party have some younger candidates that are or newcomers, at least to the political scene. So I think really that it doesn't necessarily mean to me that young people are going to vote for young candidates, because it's a question of family connections, because again the family plays an important role. If a particular family has staunch VIP supporters or staunch NDP supporters, then that usually translates right down to everyman jack, so to speak. And so that is an important aspect, but it comes back again also to the extent to which the young people are dissatisfied. And I think that to some extent is going to determine how they vote in the upcoming year.
And I agree with that, the family analysis, but in my thought, I was also wondering, are there trends in the family structure in the territory in terms of diffusing, if you will,
the heads of the families being able to control the younger person.
As families splinter a little bit more than they had been in the past, whether in fact you can really count on that, when you go in that yard, you get 100% in one direction. And I think it really, as we've said,
that's interesting.
It's to be stated to say that in some instances there were the means by which politicking took place in the past oftentimes more appeal to the older folks. So they were the ones attending the meetings and getting the information and making decisions. But I think that by virtue of the role of the internet, and even not just the stories but the blogs, you find now a number of young people who previously would not have been the one to initially receive information on behalf of the family, if you will, now getting some of that information firsthand, whether from the internet directly or through social media. So it'll be interesting to get that sense to see, as I said, rather than one source of information to the family, several sources.
It's also begging the question whether the children or swaying the parents instead of the parents swaying the children.
True. That's interesting. But I think it really perhaps the most relevant question is the question of whether the children are now, by virtue of receiving information independently, making their own assessments and so on, are more independent in terms of how they exercise their franchise. But looking at the statistics in terms of the increase in voters, and bearing in mind the comment made by the supervisor of elections that a significant portion of these persons are young persons. The important question is how much of a difference is that going to make in the district, the outcome of the district elections?
Yes.
Because when you look at the increases, I mean,
but look at the 3rd district, for example.
Look at the 3rd district, exactly. I mean, you have
the greater increase.
291 voters, and that's the greater increased voters, right? And that can make a serious impact in any district. That number of voters can make a major difference in the outcome. And then you have the 8th district with 281 new registered voters. But even in some of the other districts where you only have just over 100, 114 or 123 and so on, 116, this can make a significant difference in the outcome of the general elections.
And going back to the 3rd district, a consideration I want to bring to our attention is that the 3rd district is 5th in population size, and has the most registered voters. So it seems to be something going on there. I don't know whether it's a level of concern or something in the district is motivating the population there, or the residents there to go and register to vote. I don't know. I can say certainly that more young people were born to the district over a period of time than was. So certainly that's interesting.
Well, also too, it's at one point during the early part of the campaign, the whole question of voter apathy and so on was raised, and I think even some of the politicians on the campaign trail said that we are hearing more and more people saying that they are not going to vote,
right?
And they're not just talking about young people, I would think, but
that may have been turned around.
That may have been turned around, exactly. So. That may very well have been turned around, and I certainly hope it has, because I mean I think we all want to encourage registered voters to go out and exercise their right to vote and participate and hopefully make a difference.
We're going to take a break, and we're going to come right back with more discussion right after these words from our sponsors.
This program is sponsored by the law firm of J.S. Archibald & Co. and by the trust company J.S. Archibald Trust Services Limited, both of Roadtown, Tortola, BVI.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm Ed Income here with Dr. Dawson and Attorney Ferrara, and it's a prelude, sort of a warm-up to election coverage that's going to be coming next Monday. And those of you watching can call your friend, call your family in the States, and let them know they could check us out on jtvlive.net. We're streaming live, and of course during the election coverage, everything that happens in the studio will be going international on JTV Live. And those of you who don't have television sets or don't have cable, you can see us live on jtvlive.net. So that's something for you to look forward to. Nobody's gonna be left behind. It's gonna be coverage for everyone, you know. So certainly, that's new development. Technology is really making an impact on this election. A number of issues, new issues, have come up this election. You know, it's like Bill Clinton used to say, "Is the economy stupid?" You know, it's the economy, but along with the economy, a slew of different things have happened. We've had deficit spending, we had infrastructural challenges, we had difficulties with healthcare. And I want to take the economy first. Have we been hearing enough solutions? We've heard a lot of what some would call bashing. Have we been hearing enough solutions from the candidates?
I think when you consider across the board the major parties, as well as a number of the independent candidates and all the other parties aside from those feeling nearly a full slate of candidates, I think we do find that there are a number of different ideas and approaches as to how the economy, we can have economic recovery, and how development should take place. I think as you listen, there are various points where there seems to be focus on making money, as opposed to focus on how we use it once we get it. But I think that there has been a lot of conversations that are turning on sides of the same issue. Let's just take it for an example relative to say cruise tourism, and what is going to be the balance and the mix for tourism going forward in the future. You know, will be the role of cruise tourism? What will be the role of the traditional hotel overnight guests? What is the role of villas? What is the role of charter yachts and so on? And how do we promote each sector, and to what extent we put resources in developing the various sectors? So I think that that was a central question for a number of the parties, and I think that those certain groups who I would say seem to have vested interests will certainly pay keen attention. Certainly when it comes to the role of cruise tourism, the taxi drivers in particular are very keen to know what the position of any party is, and there are others as far as even villas. Those persons who have invested in small properties want to know what their position is. So I think that there have been a number of positions. I think you may find, even as you go from group to group, you will find some overlap as far as what those positions are.
Markets is certainly a challenge as well, particularly in light of the fact that the United States is 70% of our tourist market, and they were having some financial challenges. That seems to be something that the concern is, if Americans are not coming, where are we going to get?
And the question of the just the length of the season, the idea of having a plant sitting idle for half of a year, is seen as being unacceptable, and the idea really that you don't just snap your fingers and make it happen. It really calls for strategy and determining what type of market would allow you to ensure that more of your plant is utilized more evenly throughout the year. So I really consider that too. And I hope that voters, I do believe that voters are looking, not all voters, but I believe many voters are looking at their particular issue and seeing how is my issue being addressed by this group or that group, or whether it's an independent candidate.
But the economy certainly has been an issue that has dominated the campaign, and rightly so. This is a very tough economy worldwide, except for places perhaps like Brazil and China and India and so on. And those economies are still growing at significantly high rates. The United States economy has and continues to have many challenges. And as you rightly pointed out, Cromwell, 70% of our tourism products, so to speak, it depends on the United States economy. I think what we've seen in the campaign is that on the one hand, the Virgin Islands Party, as the ruling party, the government of the day, have sought to emphasize that, well, these are difficult economic times. Not just for the BVI, but generally speaking. And we have managed the country fairly well during these difficult economic times. And they point to particular things like, for example, no civil servants were laid off, and they point to certain reports or certain statements made by persons outside the BVI as to how well the BVI is doing, and you know, those reports may be subject to one interpretation or another. On the other hand, the National Democratic Party has sought to point out, well, there's been deficit spending and so on and so forth, and you haven't really managed the economy properly, and you haven't really cushioned the effect and the impact as much as you could have had you managed the economy properly. The question that I think which you have posed, Cromwell, is relates as to whether there have been much emphasis on solutions. And I think when we look at the tourism pillar, because as we know, we have two main pillars of the economy, tourism and financial services. There has been quite a bit on the campaign trail, I think, from both political parties and also from other parties and other candidates in relation to tourism. And some of it, you know, you may take with a grain of salt, so to speak, because some of the ideas that have come out, you question their feasibility, their workability, you know, whether really those are the kind of solutions that you really need. And some solutions, some of these ideas may come from candidates who you know, may not be as experienced as others in the whole concept of governance. But I think really there has been an attempt to emphasize that we need to diversify, and we need to look to places like China and so on and so forth. But these things are easier said than achieved. And I think in principle, we might all accept that there is a need for diversification. The question is, how do you bring about that diversification, and how do you do it effectively? We point to Jamaica and what they are seeking to do with the Chinese and the Chinese government and so on and so forth, and in order to show that that is certainly a market that is available and is open. We look at the South American market that needs to be exploited, and then we tie all of that in. But one thing it seems to me is that both of the main political parties seem to be in agreement that there needs to be something done about airlift into the territory. The question of which of the 4 or 5 or 6 alternative options that are on the table will finally be selected, I think will rest in the hands of the new government and so on. But there seems to be agreement that something needs to be done about airlift into the territory. In relation to financial services, there have been certain things said, and I think that speaking as someone who is to some extent practices in the financial services industry, I think some of these ideas may not have been as well thought out as they ought to be, and because persons may be speaking from a knowledge base that is rather limited in terms of how financial services does operate. And then you have the perennial question about, again, diversification in relation to the economy itself, and where is that third pillar, where is that niche industry, and so on. And there's been some you know, statements about that, people trying to emphasize agriculture. That is always been emphasized during the campaign trail, because obviously people want to send a message to the farmers that you are not being left out. Agriculture is important, we need to feed ourselves. And then that dovetails into the whole question in relation to the fishing, fishing as well, but in relation to the greenhouse and the whole argument about, well, was the greenhouse project a good idea, a bad idea? idea. Where is it now? Was it good money invested, or have we just wasted our money? It's not producing anything. It's said that the buildings are up there, rats are running about, and so on and so forth. I don't know whether that's so or not. So, but what I think if there's one sort of criticism I think that could perhaps be levied is there has not really been any serious attempt to show how these various plans and policies tie in to a more national vision and national plan for the development and moving the country forward. And I think to some extent that is what really has been lacking during this campaign. A clear articulation of a vision for the country, not for 4 years or even for 10 years, but maybe for 15 years. And how do you get there? And how development and advancement in particular sectors of the economy, particular sectors of the aspects of the country itself, how are they interrelated? And the role in particular that education plays. And it may be that to some extent these things are covered in the manifestos. I haven't really had the time myself to read.
We haven't heard of more of a holistic approach to development in a long-term plan.
In a long-term plan, and I think that's one area perhaps that of criticism.
What has come up lately as an issue, of course, is the relationship with the UK. In light of the statement, the proposal that is on the table that the UK seeks to have us submit our budget for annual approval prior to passing the House of Assembly. Some persons see it as going backwards. Some persons see it as an emasculation of our humanity and the territory, and some persons see it as a normal development from the British standpoint, where they want to sort of rein in their overseas territories. I'm not quite sure with the advent of a new white paper and a new development of a new relationship, what is the UK trying to achieve here, and how the political parties are perceiving those developments.
Yes, well, that issue is one, and I think you have put it in its proper perspective, because we've had this white paper that has been in place that has sort of set the broad parameters and guidelines for the relationship between the overseas territories and the United Kingdom. And if I remember correctly, that paper particularly emphasizes that it's to be founded on a relationship whereby the overseas territories are to be, as much as possible, allowed to make their own decisions and so on and so forth. And the question of how this new development ties into that, I suppose have to put this in context, because there have been some difficulties in the Turks and Caicos Islands that has resulted in the suspension of the Constitution. And those difficulties were rooted particularly in financial problems and allegations of corruption in high places in the elected representative in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And there may be a debate as to, and different views as to whether the step taken by the United Kingdom was heavy-handed in suspending the Constitution. And that continues to be the case, where it's British rule up to today, and I think the projection is that that's not likely to change before either 2012 or 2013. But when one situation develops, it's not unusual for that to dictate, at least in part, the approach and the thinking in relation to the other overseas territories. And there are also issues, I should add, in relation to Montserrat and Anguilla, fiscal issues.
And Caymans.
And Cayman Islands.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They all have been...
They all have had their issues.
Suffering from, I don't know whether it's mismanagement or just poor management of the
particularly.
resources.
And in fact, I mean, when you consider just the news coming out of these various islands, it does seem to put the BVI in a bit of a positive light, given a number of the issues that have emerged in a number of those territories. Yeah. And just as you were saying, Jerry, that when we think of the pieces as far as British policy and the approach to the overseas territory, if you look at it piece by piece, it may appear to be one thing, but when you start to look at the cumulative effect, you really then say, what is the policy? What is the position relative to the territories? And the question is, and I'd even like to hear the opinion of you good gentlemen, as to whether in this election season, do you think that this was a turning point? That is to say that various parties really analyzed this or looked at it differently and putting forward or offering a different solution that as far as our relationship with the United Kingdom is concerned?
Well, I mean, when this issue surfaced, it seemed to have come out when the deputy premier made a certain statement during her launch in the 8th district, and that was immediately pounced upon by the National Democratic Party to say, well, you know, that is an indication of mismanagement and fiscal irresponsibility on the part of the government, and that is why the UK government is making this move, and we in the BVI have fought since Chief Minister Wheatley was able to achieve this for us, and we were able to balance our budgets repeatedly over the years, that this is something that we should not take lightly and so on. And of course the Virgin Islands Party has come out and say, well, they are not in favor of it being done either. But this is something which is being dictated, as it were, by the United Kingdom government. I don't know whether that's a turning point in the campaign. To me, the National Democratic Party and those who seek to take that position in relation to this issue will have to link that with specifics of financial mismanagement, and I think they've tried to do that by pointing to what they see as deficits over the last 3 years, and say, well, it's because of deficit spending that has led, that is a major factor that has led to the United Kingdom making this move. But in the end, again, it's I'm not sure how that's going to play out with the voters. I'm not sure how that's going to play out with the voters. It is an issue of significance. It is an issue of importance, and we should all be concerned about it, because on the one hand, you are seeking to make constitutional advancement, and some constitutional advancement was achieved with the 2007 Constitution. And the trend in constitutions is that you have less control.
You're walking towards independence.
You're walking in the direction of independence. You're walking in the direction of less control, greater autonomy, at least. Exactly. And this seems to be retrogressive.
Regardless of the reason for it, and it might be not necessarily mismanagement, as you say, it could just be a bad economy.
Right.
But regardless of the reason, it is being perceived as a step back. No, of course, from a nationalist perspective and a pro-independence perspective, I see it as a regression. And actually, I use in my broadcast, particularly on radio, a stronger word, one of emasculation. Where you can it's like living in your father's house, a grown man walking, earning all your money, paying your bills, but you gotta ask your father permission to buy a bed.
I remember your analogy.
So I view it very, very strongly from that perspective, that we want to be out of Britain's clutches altogether. Because the other thing that I'm looking at, since you asked my opinion, you shouldn't do that. is my view that the mother is trying to suck the child. and that I'm looking at a UK Virgin Islands. My biggest fear is a UK Virgin Islands, you know, and us being lumped in the bunch of Anguilla, Cayman, Turks and Caicos, Montserrat, and so on. Us being a part of that whole group who have not done well in managing our financial affairs, and now have to be brought back under the control, more of a control of Great Britain, and then them turn us into like a U.S. Virgin Islands, a UK Virgin Islands, where now UK citizens are going to be able to bring their businesses and establish their businesses in the BVI at will, because of course British is a British, a US is a US, and the impact that's going to have on our social development, our economic development. They don't got the whole thing done.
Well, I don't know
Don't project it in my head all the way down to the end.
I might be naive, but I don't have any real fear, I think, of that happening. I do remember, for example, when finally it was decided by the United Kingdom to grant us full British citizenship, and hence the right to carry, the UK passport, the European Union
I'm very
passport.
concerned about that.
I think that the then Chief Minister, Honorable Rafferty O'Neill, he said, look, we're prepared to accept that, provided it doesn't come with any of those kind of conditions attached, where the people from the United Kingdom can come here freely and so on and so forth and do those things. And I think collectively, I believe, I think I would be correct in saying that all various politicians, regardless of what side of the political aisle they're on, they'll be totally against that type of thing.
I think all of us will be against it. But what I'm concerned about is, from a legal standpoint, an international legal standpoint, and a United Nations relationship standpoint, would we be able to resist?
But I think the UN would be more there to protect against, because you have the various UN declarations and so on that call for, in essence, greater autonomy being achieved within dependent territories and so on. So I would like to think, at least within the framework of that, they would not be in favor of that type of thing.
We got to take a break, but certainly. I think the whole trend is anti-colonial from the UN and the territories, and I think that the U.S. Virgin Islands relationship with the United States is the model for those islands that perhaps may not want independence, but want some level of autonomy, and that might be a model for them. So that's why I'm bringing that to the table, and the fact that how a UK citizen in England saying, well, them citizens in the BVI could come here and get education and
the same rates
and medical attention and so on, and we can't go there and do nothing there. That can't be fair.
Of course.
So that I think in a court, then you would help me with that. That could be a serious challenge.
But that's I don't know so much in a court, but that can be said even now.
Yes.
I mean, because once you get that passport and you get the full UK citizenship, that argument can be made.
And then there's still what I found out in the UK was, and not to say I spoke with many people, but few people I spoke with, there's a public perception out there that the UK is supporting countries like ours. That their taxpayer dollar is what supporting these countries.
There might be some substance to my claim. We're going to take a break and come right back with more Spotlight right after these words.
Spotlight is brought to you by the National Bank of the Virgin Islands, the Radio Doctor, Tortola Concrete Limited, and Varieties and Electronics.
Welcome back to Spotlight. As usual, just when it starts getting good, it's time to go. But this is just a preview of what we're going to be talking about, some of the issues that's going to be raised, and some of the analysis that's going to be done during our election coverage. So you make sure that you keep it glued right here to JTV channel 55, and of course you can catch us live on JTV live.net. We're also going to be coming live from the Cultural Center as well. We're going to have a live feed from the Cultural Center, real time, and of course that real time is going to be streamed out internationally on the JTV live.net. and we're going to be giving you all the facts, figures, statistics, data, making predictions, projections, and analysis. Total coverage here on special edition of Spotlight on Monday evening, so you make sure you tune in to JTV. There's some changes been made in the electoral process. I would like to bring you up to date. I promised the supervisor of elections that I was going to bring you up to date on some of the things that you need to be looking for. Advanced polling is on Friday, November the 4th, and that's from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. in all 9 districts, and that's for elderly, 70 and over, persons who are disabled, persons who are having difficulty reading, persons who are blind and need assistance. Your assistance could be in the form of a friend, one friend per person, or if you don't have a friend, the presiding officer will make the X in the presence of the poll clerk and the candidate or candidate's agent. So you can come. If you don't have a friend, the poll clerk in the presence of the candidate and candidate's agent will mark your X for you. Of course, polling day is November the 7th, and the polls open from 6 a.m. and close at 6 p.m. except in Anegada, where it opens from 6 to 5 p.m., 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. No voting in Salt Island this time, so the Salt Island voters are going to be picked up from Salt Island, transported to Rotown between the hours of 7 a.m. to 12 noon. No cell phones will be used in the polling stations. No sale of intoxicants on polling day. All campaign paraphernalia must be taken down before midnight, November the 6th, or the candidates will be fined $1,000 or spend 12 months in jail. All the paraphernalia got to come down midnight, November the 6th, or $1,000 fine or 12 months in jail. Right? Make sure when you mark your X is in the box, right? And only an X will be acceptable. A check mark won't be acceptable, your initials won't be acceptable, nothing else except an X inside the box is going to be acceptable, it's going to be counted as a vote. And all the ballots, including that large ballots, is going to be counted in the district stations. So those are some of the changes that have been made to the electoral process this year, this election season. So make sure you pay attention. Of course, you can call the office, the election office, and get that information if you missed it. And I'm sure that it's going to be back on again on Spotlight this weekend. And you probably could go to Spotlight, go to jtvlive.net, and you'll get some of that information there as well. So that's that fulfills my promise. We've fallen on 10 o'clock. I'm sorry I didn't get to your text and we didn't have phone calls, but it's what it was. Dr. Dawson and Attorney Ferrara, we were all here to give you an update on the campaign and bring you up to speed on how it's going forward and what's going to be happening next Monday evening here on JTV. So tune in to JTV next week on Monday. That's Monday at 7 p.m. Dr. Dawson and Attorney Ferrara will be back with me, and perhaps another person as well. We're not sure yet. We're going to be bringing you live coverage. We're going to be talking about the issues, the campaign, the strategies. I got one text that I enjoy your show. Looking forward to election night. Yes, that's the spirit. Thank you very much. And we're going to have charts and graphs and everything. It's going to be just like the big leagues. Magic board, touch screen. Just joking. We on the way though. And we're gonna be bringing you the live coverage and keeping you updated on the winners and the losers and interviews and just general coverage. So you keep it tuned into JTV. Thanks for your words of encouragement, and of course, thank you for continuing to email me at jtvspotlight@yahoo.com. Medjuenko reminding you that when the spotlight is on, you see the facts. Peace and blessings.
This program is sponsored by the law firm of J.S. Archibald & Co. and by the trust company J.S. Archibald Trust Services Limited, both of Roadtown, Tortola, BVI.